This moderator is an incredible storyteller. I had the privilege of meeting him earlier this year, watching some of his work, getting to interview him. It was really fantastic. So I think there's no better person to talk about this next subject. So let's give it up one time for Josh Bones Murphy.
How do you go after that panel? Not exactly sure. Thank you all for being here and for making it to the end of the day. These are really heady ideas, and I think that's why we're here today, to talk about story as a way to kind of promote difficult, nuanced ideas, inspiring ideas, scary ideas, right? That's why we're here. I'm a filmmaker, but I'm a story activist. And I think all of story starts with very intentional listening. So today, I made a point of listening to everybody that was on the stage to understand their story and their construct. And I think it's really important that we kind of honor where those stories come from. I'm dyslexic. As a kid, I grew up listening to a lot of stories because I couldn't read them. And I began to tell a lot of stories because it was my way of kind of making sense of the world. And I think that's what's led me to kind of live a life that's pursuing the idea of what stories can do in our everyday life. So I've got some amazing people that I want to offer up here as well. But I just want to mention, too, the importance of story kind of to the human condition. It's kind of obvious, but we are Homo sapiens, the storytelling ape. Homo sapien is Latin for wise. I don't actually think we're that wise. I think we might be kind of clever, but maybe not really wise necessarily. And I think, we have to consider how stories are told and see it as a continuum. The stories we tell today are not the stories we told yesterday, thank God. And they will not be the stories we tell in just 5 minutes, if not 5 years from now. Stories are always shifting, and they're always changing to accommodate the new reality and the new world view. And I think that we have to understand that, is that when we get ensconced in certain stories, we can fall into a trap. And we have to be open to those new stories and those new narratives that can kind of define the way the world and the people that are living in the world today interact with one another. So I think it's very important that we know that stories have to change, and they hopefully will help us change. Historically, stories have been a source of good, but they've also been an enormous source of evil. Stories can concoct ways that we interact with people that are the worst of humanity. And I think we have to recognize that as well. And we also have to then say, how do we interact with that? When you think about how good and evil is even interpreted, it's through story. In religion, story is religion. The Judeo-Christian religion is the largest practiced. I'm not making a comment on if it's good or bad, but the vast number of people are informed today on a story that was told over 2,000 years ago. And if I said to you, in that story, where is heaven? I bet collectively people would point up. But in many other traditions, heaven is down. And imagine if we today considered heaven to be down, that we're connected to it, that we're living in it today. Imagine that. But we were informed by a story that was told so long ago. And perhaps these stories need a little bit of a renewal, a new way to look at it, a way that accommodates the fact there's 8 billion people on Earth today. We have to consider that. So, with no further ado, though, I want to kind of get to these amazing storytellers who, on this stage, will kind of share their inspirations and how their stories inspire people and change lives. So I want to have everyone come on up here, and we'll introduce you. We got José González from Latino Outdoors. Mike Mariner from Road Trip Nation. And Kathy Kasich from Metamor Films. Hi. Welcome. Hi. Welcome. Nice to meet you.
I was going to say, I'll claim credit for Len.
So I'm going to have each of you just kind of give a quick introduction, and then we're going to show some of the work just to kind of put us in this place of the stories we tell. So let's start with you, Jose.
Great. Here
we go. All right, so buenas tardes, everyone. Hello, my name's Jose, he, him. Do I'll respond to anything offered with your respect. I greet you all from traditional, stolen, occupied, unceded land of the Nisenan, Southern Maidu, Miwok, among others, up in the Sacramento area. One of the hats that I wear that I'm here is as the founder of Latino Outdoors. I wear other hats as well. I'm on the board of Parks California, which is a statutory nonprofit partner to state parks. So if you love your state parks and your marine protected areas, that's part of that. I wear a few other hats as well, but I'm really excited to be here with you all. I'm an immigrant from Mexico, so I grew up as a migrant kid, and that has informed a lot of the way that I approach the work, which led to the founding of Latino Outdoors, and I'm excited to speak a little bit more about how that has been one point in my cultural wayfinding.
Thank you, Mike.
My name is Mike Mariner. I'm co-founder of Road Trip Nation. Road Trip Nation is a national media and education organization that puts students on road trips every year in a fleet of huge green motorhomes. And the students go across America and interview people in different fields all across the country to kind of help them figure out what they want to do with their lives. And we create stories out of those road trips and share them on PBS every year. We're a big fan of public media. We're in 50 million households and just really believe in the power of public media. But also in schools. So we're in half of all U.S. public high schools sharing these stories with the next generation so kids can see examples of stories of people like them to help inspire them with what do they want to do with their futures.
Yay for public media in school, right? Kathy.
Well, I just want to say first, thank you so much for having me here. It's been an absolute joy to be here. I'm so inspired by everybody. I'm a Kathy Kasich. I'm a filmmaker, director, producer, and principal of Metamorph Films, which is a company I started in 2006. And I'm also a associate professor at California State University, Sacramento. Singers up. Anyway, so I mostly focus on environmental and science documentaries. I was a former biologist turned filmmaker.
A recovering biologist?
Recovering. That's what I call myself.
I am one as well.
Really?
Yes, I
am.
Yes.
You call yourself that too? Wow. It's so exciting. Well, yeah, we're here, sharing that recovering story.
Well, let's take a second to see some of the work here, because I think it's important. So there's an understanding in the audience of how we do what we do, if you will. So we're going to roll this first. We're going to start with Latino Outdoors, Saved by Nature, I believe is the name, correct? Not sure. And then we're going to go into a piece for Road Trip Nation, and then a piece, I believe, on Antarctica that you've worked on?
I think this one's Greenland.
Oh, Greenland. Okay, great. Here we go.
Travel for me has opened up perspectives, and it can invite you to push the boundaries of what you know. And you don't always have to travel far away to appreciate the magic of the world. Traveling really humbles me. It's part of who I am. My name is José González, and I'm the founder of Latino Outdoors. Latino Outdoors is a community, an organization, a space for people that might have this interest in the outdoors, but maybe don't feel they have a community to do it with. They should be able to connect to all the benefits of nature and the outdoors. Most of my travel has been getting to go on different adventures, like to come on a group hike to see the redwoods here in Oakland.
José González here. If you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, join us for a very special event.
Latino Outdoors works at the community level to provide intergenerational field trips, hiking, camping, adventuring, exploration, and so forth. And it's in over 13 states, and that will continue to change and grow. Everywhere that I travel, I want some sense of connection, whether it's a new location, it's a new community, it's a new food, you name it. And so when I'm traveling, going on a light jog connects me to place. And Oakland is astoundingly beautiful, both culturally and ecologically. I remember as a kid running out on the trails in my hometown. That stays there with me as I explore these places. I was born in Amatlán de Caña, the state of Nayarit, Mexico. Relatively rural town where the outdoors is just outside. But I wasn't thinking of them out the outdoors, it was just afuera. That definitely began to fragment with migration to the US just before the age of 9. Pretty young. It was like uprooting in the sense of like home was gonna be very different from now on. I wasn't receiving a lot of cultural cues that being Mexican was okay. It's the classic ni de aquí ni de allá, kind of follows you everywhere. And the sense of disconnection and isolation and living in a new place that was unfamiliar. As a kid growing up in the Central Valley, I remember in one of these school field trips, we were gonna go to a state park, Calaveras Big Trees. I show up to this, and first is that sense of scale, feeling so small. You look up and you look up and you look up. It's almost like time pauses for a bit. Sense of awe and wonder of a kid who's trying to figure out how he fits in this new culture. Redwoods for me are basically like elders. Your ancestors, your antepasados telling me that I belong. They're saying, welcome home. Traveling to the outdoors was now a thing. How can I have more experiences and provide experiences like what I had? Latino Outdoors first began as a blog, as just putting my first story out there. Here's kind of what I'm thinking, feeling, experiencing, and asking of others. Does this resonate with you? And then beginning to get some of those first comments. They're like, ooh, wait, is this real? Like, how do I sign up? So Latino Outdoors really kind of starts with the idea of how do we connect cultura with the outdoors and create a new relationship to travel. I want to use the power of community to take other people outdoors to go out and experience and hike in this way. They should be able to connect to all the benefits of nature and the outdoors.
This will be good. We can quickly go around and just share a little bit about our intention for the hike. I'm grateful that you're here. So my intention is going to be that everybody's expertise, whatever it looks like, comes in.
My name is Miguel Marquez. Happy to see some good friends and some new faces. This place has a special place in my heart, so happy to be back.
My name's Aurora. I love redwoods, and it's such a beautiful day right now, so I'm excited to be out here with all of you.
You can call me Mayu. I've never been here, so I'm excited to be here, and yeah.
We don't get to come out here that often, so it's nice to visit different open spaces from time to time.
Yeah, this is my favorite part of the park because it gets redwoods on both sides.
A place like Oakland, even if I didn't grow up in an area like this, I feel at home. And it's because of the people.
He's singing.
I always just get a thrill and joy of seeing teams that are coming together.
Parents, and they make a bunch of Mexican food.
Right. Yeah. You notice something cool and interesting, por favor, share it with us. It's really more about sharing each other's joys and passions.
Getting to hike in a landscape that still retains some redwood ecology, it's deeply special. The landscape could be new to you, and yet there still might be something for which this is familiar.
Bay laurel leaves, the ones out here are like 4 times as pungent as you would find in your spice store. You can come out here into nature and forage and collect for your meals at home.
We wanted to kind of close out the hike with what we connected to and what we're taking away and so forth. So pass it around. You can be as short and as long as you like.
I've been noticing how tall the trees are. I feel like it's a really humbling moment. But also, there are a lot of new trees that are just starting to sprout. We need to have other people that are around us supporting us, and that's something that we can see in the nature. It's a really beautiful place.
I love and miss my family all the time, so whenever I see something beautiful or experience something beautiful, they're always my first thought. So I always wonder what they would feel like if they were out here.
I read an article and it said only 5% of the forest is still alive today. But it's still so much. So we should all be grateful that we can be here today. And a lot of people, they don't have the chance to be here.
I want my legacy to be more like a redwood. You might start with a seed and you're down in the dirt putting out that first root, and then ultimately growing and then being able to like produce more seeds and contribute to a cycle that others can continue. Estamos aquí. We are here. Yo cuento in Spanish like a story, as well as cuento as a way to be able to say we count through the stories that we get to tell about ourselves. You don't have to leave your cultura at the trailhead to be able to travel with the sense of this community, because traveling is the way to really encounter and appreciate what diversity means. And that is all part of the work that this community has done.
I'm going to give a quick shout out to Marriott, who helped put this together, because there were supposed to be 2 people here and they had to change at the last minute. They couldn't make it, which got us 2 other amazing people. So originally we heard more about how Jose and Marriott had kind of generated this story, but we'll go into that afterwards. Yeah, we dodge and weave. And now we're going to go to Road Trip Nation.
There is a place that sometimes appears in dreams on hot, sweltering days.
Here we can see the ice caps getting smaller and smaller.
Knowing when the Greenland ice sheet was present and when it was gone are absolutely critical questions as we look out in the next couple hundred years to what's going to be probably the most massive change that we've ever seen as a species.
Paradoxically, our ability to look forward in time is best aided by looking backwards in time.
We are looking back in time. We could, for instance, see what kind of cycles there are.
This starts back in the Cold War, believe it or not, with the collection of the very first ice core that was drilled all the way through the entire thickness of the ice sheet of Greenland. And they recovered about 3.5 meters of frozen sediment. These sediments were forgotten about.
When we opened these boxes, it was just like finding, gold or something better than gold.
I said, I think there's fossil plants in here.
Boom, there's a twig. I couldn't believe it. Every single sample has plants in it, which was surprising. And then we look at these and we're like, oh my God, there's bugs in it.
The only way you're going to get light on those sediments underneath almost a mile of ice is if the ice is gone.
Just what was the threshold that caused that part of Greenland to not have ice on it anymore?
If you can have much lower CO2 and melt the Greenland ice sheet, what will happen if we have very high CO2?
How long will it take to get how much smaller? And how much sea level rise over the next century?
The sea level rise could be more than 5 meters.
Had that core been taken apart and used up in the 1960s, we'd never know what we know now. Because the analyses that every one of us on this team does didn't exist.
That archive of sediment holds precious clues about the rhythm of the ice sheet, its patterns of ice retreat and advance, the memory of darkness, light, and ice.
That was, of course, Greenland. That would be a hell of a road trip. That was not Road Trip Nation, but still exciting. I thought, too, because Greenland was brought up, I'm just going to give a shout out to one of the story activists of our time, Dr. Paul Watson, who right now is being detained in Greenland for fighting for what is right. And I think it's always important to remember the lengths people go to tell stories and the implications when those people are persecuted.
I actually went to visit him in Nook Prison.
You did?
I did, this last summer, yeah.
Well, maybe we're going to pick up on that afterwards. There's more to talk about after this, but thank you. I'm looking forward to hearing from that. And now, Road Trip Nation.
On your tombstone, at the end of the day, they're going to see three things. They're going to see your birth date, they're going to see that dash, and they're going to see your death date. The front and the back, they're done. But the thing that has the most importance to me is that dash. What happened in your life during the time you were born to the time you passed away? What defined you as a person?
Since 2001, we've been gathering wisdom and guidance from thousands of people through our award-winning documentary series, Road Trip Nation, and our best-selling book, Roadmap. Now we've gathered all the knowledge we've found into this course.
You have to figure out who you are, and you have to tune out all the other voices, all of them.
I love to tell people there's a path for them. That path is possible, and you can access it, and here's the living proof.
Through these online lessons, you'll get exposure to all kinds of career paths, and you'll get a deeper understanding of who you are and what you truly want out of your career.
The point is this: we all come from someplace that we did not necessarily choose, but we can choose where we're going.
And most importantly, you're going to get the chance to actually have a meaningful conversation with somebody you're inspired by, where you'll gain valuable insights that are going to help you on the road ahead.
Talking to you, it gives me it's like, you're like a superhero to me.
The whole time that we were interviewing her, I was just like, oh my God, I love you.
I've realized that there's so much I can do, and there's so many different places you can start.
The girl I am now, I feel so phenomenal.
Get started now.
Thank you. I thought I'd point out something that it's really interesting that stories are not new, obviously, but the way we share stories with people is radically different today. In the last panel, we heard of individual athletes and activists making their own content and sharing that. That did not happen even like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I mean, the ability now to use film as a medium to explain and to emote and to describe and to follow is really quite amazing. It's changed our landscape, especially in impact storytelling. So maybe I thought I would start with you, Jose. How does kind of what you do use storytelling and film to create community and action?
Thank you, and it's always interesting to watch yourself on film like that. This is no shade to Marriott, but that's probably the most corporate thing that story that we've done. But to their credit, they managed to keep a lot of the heart and soul, right? And I've done short videos for Patagonia and North Face, like a lot of the outdoor brands as well. And so I say this because you heard me say on there that element of yo cuento. And so in Spanish, cuento can mean a story, like cuéntame un cuento, but also can mean count. Yeah? Tú cuentas, yo cuento. And so from the very beginning of the founding of Latino Outdoors, we had this idea of what does it mean to yo cuento, that I count through the story, through the narratives, and especially early on, because it was literally a Google search of Latinos in the outdoors and seeing little to nothing. I knew there were people out there because I would run into them and I would meet them. I would have people that said, I want to do this in the 70s of all places. And did you know about this guy I called Yosemite Sam who used to take kids from LA? So I would be hearing all these stories, but there wasn't a community connecting point. And so in that case, the story was a blog. Putting the story in there, this is kind of what I'm thinking and processing. It wasn't a visual story in this way, it was written story in that. But it was trying to convey something, and I'll close this by kind of saying there's a couple of elements. One is that sense of connection. Core question from this was, where are there others like me? Which is not a new question, and yet it sparks this idea of I'm looking for community, even as that community was still being defined. Because it was this whole question of what do we mean by quote-unquote Latinidad, that whole messy spectrum, with also the wide variety of what outdoorsy could mean. And we were saying, what does it mean to be in this connection and intersection? And then other people were saying, ooh, I'm a part of that. what is it? And I'm like, welcome to help co-create it, because we were not going to be the ones to tell people this is what it is. We wanted to show them. We wanted to invite them into this story we're creating, so that now if you go onto Google and type in like Latinos Outdoors, you get to see the product of the community in terms of this is what it looks like in Austin, this is what it looks like in New York, this is what it looks like in Denver, this is what it looks like in San Francisco, and so forth. And so that idea of story and community go together, not just for the representation, because we know that matters and it's powerful, but it's the representation as well as seeing the reflection and some element of having been involved in that. So even though you see my face there, I'm there as I say, a voice for the community, not the voice, but it's also part of why when we did this, I say we gotta have people that I know, and that's why you saw all those faces. Each one of those is a community leader in their own right.
You know, I'll share a silly anecdote, but it's powerful. During the filming of Planet of the Apes, there was a story that was told that at lunch, the people in costume started to self-sort. The apes sat with the apes, the chimpanzees sat with the chimpanzees, and it was this weird social kind of, not by choice, but just this happened. And so you look for people who look like you. You want to find those people, and I think that's why it's so important, the representation, especially in what we call the outdoor state, this group of 175 million Americans that consider themselves lovers of the outdoors can find themselves in it. And so I really love what you do. And Mike, I think you kind of took a whole different route in kind of embracing the more kind of traditional media path rather than the self-release media path. And I think you can bring us up to speed on how public broadcasting is working today and still meeting kind of its goal.
Yeah, we're big fans of public broadcasting because, I mean, if you're a filmmaker, like I was never really like aspiring to be a filmmaker. You know, I was also a biology major in school, and I was like pre-med trying to like go into that, but we ended up taking a road trip after college to go talk to people all across America about their journeys in life, and we weren't filming it, but like what you talked about, the accessibility to storytelling now and the barrier to entry coming down lower, like that was a huge moment where the Sony VX2000 just came out, and that was like the first low-cost digital video camera. It was like $1,800, and our road trip was 3 months long, and Fry's Electronics had like a 90-day return policy. So we were like, okay, we can buy the camera, film the whole thing, and then we like return it later. But the point was never to like create a TV show or whatever, you know, but it was to go on this journey and then at some point like pay it forward and create this experience for other students, especially students who didn't have maybe the same opportunities that we had to like build road trips. And then 20 years later, we just have all these armies of road trips going out, local and national. And we have the big national ones that are on PBS, but what most people don't know is that we have a curriculum. And last year, we had 150,000 students build local community-based road trips all across America. And these are mostly in communities like South and West Side Chicago, Philadelphia, where a lot of the students aren't really building that social capital or building role modeling opportunities, and they're meeting people who are like them in these pathways. And like you said, the see it, be it, like the Mayor Lightfoot in Chicago, the former mayor of Chicago, super visionary mayor there, she had a whole initiative called the CB initiative, which is like, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So we mobilized youth all across South and West Side Chicago to build these road trip projects, and we did storytelling around it. It went on PBS as well, but it really went into schools, in Chicago public schools and the Chicago public library system, and then mobilized other students to build those road trip projects. But the great thing about PBS is that PBS is non-exclusive and it's mission-based, and so they allow the content developers to maintain all the rights to the content, which is, if you're commercially minded, that's fine, but like from our perspective, we wanted to share the rights to the IP with the city of Chicago and the library system and all that. And when, in the early days of starting Road Trip Nation, like we were talking to lots of other different content distribution channels of like where to put our stories, and it was like, there just wasn't a lot of places where you could go, where you could have scale of audience, but also retain the mission. And we, this is kind of like a little bit of detail, but like we had this development deal with MTV back, and when we launched our first book, we were like on the Today Show, and it was the 15th best-selling book, and we had all this like buzz around it. So we had this fancy Hollywood agent and this development deal with MTV, and we were developing it, and they're like, okay, so when do we vote the students off the motorhome? And we're like, we're not voting students off. Like, what are you talking about? We had no idea. We're trying to help students find their roads in life, but with PBS, like PBS never asked that question. PBS was like, we'll give you a platform, you can own all the rights, like, and you can have creative control and do what you want to do. So I think that is like one of the things that we learned on our journey is like trying to find a way to like hold on to your mission and what you believe in, which is important, like rights and IP and all that stuff, but also find channels to get it out there at scale. And doing both is really, really hard. So PBS is like one of the few places we found that allows us to do that, and like also everything else we do. So.
And how has that gone with like stories people see on PBS or more locally, and then turning that into curriculum? Because I think that's amazing. Like this film, if you will, or visual medium becoming part of the teachable moment.
Yeah, that's always been my passion. I know both of you are into schools and former teachers and stuff too. So, but bringing stories into schools, that's like what always like got me excited about Road Trip Nation was, I mean, PBS is great and has a halo effect and all of our corporate partners and brand partners, and it's good visibility and exposure, but like as a social impact organization, like bringing all these student stories and cataloging them into a database and creating tools and curriculum and digital resources and helping to kind of, because just as there's a movement around renewable energy and climate and all these things we're talking about, there's also a huge movement in school and education innovation right now too. And the way that young people are learning, like new modes of learning, and there's not a lot of great storytelling in schools. So finding ways to like harness all of these great stories here and great stories of people here and bring them into schools to kids so they can get visibility to that. That's PBS allows you to do that because they're not trying to claw up the rights, and teachers trust PBS too. PBS has PBS Learning Media. They have a network of 1.5 million teachers, and I think it's a big little secret spot that a lot of storytellers don't leverage enough. So I feel like the PBS poster, like salesman or something.
Go PBS. And I need to give a shout out to an earlier storyteller, Mike's daughter, Aquagrom.
Right.
If you saw that, that was Mike's daughter.
That's my main job is head of safety for the Aquagrom.
We need to offer in the techniques of storytelling in the digital video, if you want to call that digital storytelling space to younger generations. And of course, they're going to beat us at it every time because they know how to push the buttons a lot better than we do. One idea I kind of wanted to throw to you is that, the idea as stories go of sustainability and of environmental stewardship is in kind of popular culture, if you will, is relatively new. I mean, I was speaking at a green media panel, and I was like, wow, it's amazing that like 5 years ago, I don't think there was a sustainability director of most companies, right? And that's changing, I think, because of the way we're telling stories. So now you are able to inform through inspiration, right? And you're able to kind of use, we'll call it loosely, the scientific process to kind of inform how you share your stories. Can you talk about that and just explain what it goes into making the kind of films you like to make and why you think they kind of land as they do?
Yeah. This is going to make me sound a little professorial, but I wrote a couple chapters on my way of like making films. Because I think, so I've worked in the poles now for a number of years, and have also worked in the tropics, some just kind of hard environments, and I think that when I'm in those environments, I need something to hold on to, like, okay, this is my style, this is what I'm going to do, because film is an aesthetic medium. There's no getting around it. And as a former scientist, a recovering biologist, at first I started like, oh, I've got to teach everybody everything, all the words and but that's not really what it's about. It's about the feeling that we get. And so I approach my films first. I start with kind of like to echo what other people have said, but to start with the land as a character, because what I want to do is to try to give voice to things that don't have a voice. And the land is the first thing I think of that doesn't have a voice, that is easily heard by humans. It obviously does have a voice. You can listen to it through the wind, through the water, through any kind of process that you see or hear. out there. And then on top of that, if you do it well, you can maybe start to get a little bit of a synesthesia of sorts. And so I think about that, like how can you film something so that you can feel like you could touch it? How can I make people feel the snow and ice so that they feel it so much that when I talk about its absence, they feel that even worse, you know? So I feel like that's kind of where I start with the voice, and then also the voice of people, because that voice of people is how you get to know the character, and you can get into their being just because the voice comes from within, and it's much more than just the visual of who they are and what they look like. It's who they are inside. So yeah, I guess that's kind of where I start, and craft the narrative that way. Ideally as like, I don't know, I've been doing kind of sort of more expedition type things, and but I don't really want to tell an expedition story, you know? So it's that.
It's kind of a sensory thing, right?
I call it sensory verite.
Oh, I like that. Cinema verite, swing to sensory verite. Very nice. You know, it's as somebody who's also worked in some harsh climates, I think, and that is weather and others, even political climates, we like to say that there's three things that you never want to see being made, and that's sausage, politics, and movies. But when you get through the making of movies, it becomes pretty great. And I think when I look at your work you've done, it's just kind of, you realize how much kind of suffering it takes to kind of get the imagery so you can create that sensory verite. It's pretty spectacular. Maybe throw into a little different kind of topic, and I'll swing back to you, Jose. Yeah, the responsibility of a storyteller.
I think one is, for me, it's going to connect to what's been shared not just here, but with other in previous panels. And I love to play with words too, so I'm like connecting it all. So I'll weave in a couple of things, right? You mentioned the responsibility. So these are just some examples and facets. When we're talking about an educational responsibility, it doesn't mean that you say, I have to make an educational film, and yet, so even, if, you know, the Marriott piece, because of my background in education, if you pay attention, you'll notice little things as to how I'm approaching the experience. So it isn't, let's go out here and I will educate you about this landscape. It's more about, it's like, how are we welcoming everybody's expertise, and we're gonna co-share all this. What are you noticing? Because then we can talk about observation skills. So it is less of that, right, dictatorial type of like, let me convey my expertise on you. So little things like that. Two is, it is about the land. And so the ways that, for me, you know, I've mentioned the messiness of Latinidad as an identity, because we can say, welcome to being colonizer and colonized. Like, that is the space that we hold. And so part of that invitation has been, how can the language of ecology and mentorship for the land inform the way that I also convey a responsibility with and to the land. So we've heard before, which I'm glad, I'm excited that I'm hearing people say, it's a reminder that we're part of nature. And I was like, yes, it's how are we a part of nature, not apart from nature? And what does that mean in our respective practices, as well as the opportunities to then now be in community with expanded communities? And so I'll give you this one example, and then I'll close it out, because the idea of responsibility now comes wedded with the experience. It isn't just, I have a right to this trail, I have a right to be able to recreate in this space in this way. It's, I have a responsibility to this place. I have a responsibility that now is woven into a relationship. And so I'll close you with this one because it's a favorite that when I share it, people like, it clicks. And now I get to go up and say, what are even some of the foundational logics that have guided a lot of the ways that I approach the work of created things or so forth. So even when I'm telling a story, I can start thinking, is this extractive storytelling as opposed to, is there an ethics behind the way that I'm approaching this? And for me, it's started now even more the land. And so I tell people, like, imagine all of the times that you might have heard your team is functioning like a well-oiled machine. It's meant to be a compliment. Nothing wrong with machines, right? I flew here on a plane. I have a phone and whatnot. But it sounds so natural because we've embedded it as part of the narrative. But if I say, hey, your team is functioning like a well-nurtured meadow or like a thriving meadow, and you're like, sounds weird. Well, why is the machine better? Who here is going to go to a meadow and say, I need you to meadow better, right? Come on, meadow, you're not meadowing enough. But now we can think about what that means in terms of leadership, in terms of productivity, relationships, and so forth. So I weave that into the responsibility because then it can hopefully cue us in to listen better, right? Don't just appreciate this for like the beauty, it's beauty and more. Don't just think about this as an experience that's guided in one particular way. What are we deconstructing along the way? And sometimes we may not know, but at least the questions will help us begin to unpack it more. So I went all over there for you, but you asked the question.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, round of applause for that. It's interesting, and I like these wide-ranging topics because they become interesting. The responsibility of a filmmaker for me, I was confronted with at some point as a contract director working for a startup in Silicon Valley. I was just storyteller, and the person was on the rise, the technology was on the rise. I was like, this is amazing. I did all of the original media for Theranos. So, yeah, you laugh, right? And I laughed at first, and then I was like, oh no. Am I part of the machine? Was I responsible for propaganda? And it left me questioning, as a storyteller, how do you even know when the responsibility is to you to tell the story? What happens when the story comes unwound? And it was a rude awakening for me, because you go in with all the best intentions and then you realize, oh my God, I had no idea. And my mea culpa of sorts was that I made sure that the footage that we had shot appeared in Alex Gibney's film, The Inventor, Out for Blood in Silicon Valley. So if you see that film and you see all the behind-the-scenes stuff, that was stuff that we shot, and we did that after the company collapsed, and we could actually see how it worked. So that was my responsibility to make sure of it. But I thought I'd just share that note. And maybe, Mike, what do you think the role of the storyteller is in conveying somebody else's story? Because that's what you do so much. You kind of highlight people's career choices, the things that define their life, their livelihood. What's the role of you as the storyteller?
I think you mentioned you have dyslexia early, and that like shaped your journey. I think like a lot of times, role of storytelling is just like telling the full story sometimes, and like the honest story about like the ups and like that was so, I thought, powerfully vulnerable for you to lead the whole session with that, you know. And a lot of people in our American culture today, we're so obsessed with everything's perfect, my life is perfect. Even like all of our LinkedIn profiles are like, I'm sure no one listed the jobs where they got fired, or how to deliver pizza, or like how to pay off student loans, and that's like really important stuff, because then for young people coming up, it's easy to get really intimidated when they go to, we hear this all the time from students in Road Trip Nation, like, oh my God, I went to LinkedIn and like nobody ever got fired, or no one ever had to pay off student loan, and it's super intimidating. So just like we try this, the whole idea of like powerful vulnerability is something we try to talk about a lot, and like flagging based on people's life experiences, whether it was a learning difference or financial hardship growing up, or being first in a family to go to college, dealing with imposter syndrome, amplifying that as like insights and milestones along your journey where you gain. And we have this rich database of 12,000 video assets now that's kind of like our resource in schools that we share with schools. And it's tagged not only based on career pathways and skills, but it's tagged based on milestones in your life. We have a whole section on learning differences. So for 1 in 5 American kids who have a learning difference, and we learned early on that language really matters. Like we did a whole road trip. All of our road trips are thematic, so we can kind of go deep into certain areas. We did a whole road trip on learning differences, and we learned that, not to call it a disorder, like it's learning difference. Just because you learn differently than somebody else doesn't mean you're less than somebody. Some of the greatest entrepreneurs and filmmakers in America have a learning difference, and so we're going to go share their asset-based stories of how they got to where they are today. We're going to be honest with their journeys and milestones. We're going to tag based on those milestones so young people can see people like them in those pathways, but we're also not going to wash it away either. But I don't know, that's like the art, I guess, in it a little bit too, is like it's asset-based storytelling, not deficit-based storytelling, but it's also truthful and celebrating all your life journeys and having some powerful vulnerability around it. So it's like, it's hard to do all of that in one thing, but that's where what we found was like leveraging students as the voices. So like, I am not the host of Road Trip Nation. I'm not like driving around America on motorhome and interviewing people. Like every year we have new generations of students applying to go on these Road Trip Nation road trips. We pass the torch every year. When we do a learning differences road trip, it's 3 students who have learning differences who applied to go on that trip. When we did a justice impacted road trip, we had road trippers who had been justice impacted who applied to go on this. I got a letter from someone in a penitentiary today from someone that watched that film on PBS. Like literally, my wife and I like read this letter this morning. I'll like choke up even like thinking about it. But it's like, I've been in prison for 18 years. I just watched a Road Trip Nation content archive from the Justice Impacted Road Trip on Adovo, this partnership we have, and it's like helping me think about my transition out of prison, you know. But it's hard getting that whole. I guess the main point is like having people closest to those issues be the storytellers, you know, and you're helping to facilitate, but like being careful to not center it around yourself too much, you know, and then it gets really, really real because they're way more honest too. You know, there's a degree of honesty when it's not like a journalist or a director or whatever, you know, so.
Amazing. Yeah, I like to say on my LinkedIn profile, don't tell anybody this, but I did make reality TV. Ooh. I was young, I needed the money, right? In fact, that's what I tell people who are getting into film. They say, how do you do it? I said, just generally don't say no to jobs. And then over time, you get to kind of curate the things you really want to lean into. And that's how you build a career. That's what I had to do, at least. Speaking to you, I'm going to use a Hemingway quote, so it's kind of a heavy one, right?
Uh-oh.
So Hemingway once said, don't mistake movement for progress. So how do you, with the films you make, how do you promote progress in the things we're trying to advocate for this new kind of understanding of our world?
That is a tough one. Yeah, I mean, how do you translate the number of people that have seen your work to progress? You know, because ultimately that's what we look at a lot, right? That audience numbers are like, where did it get out to? Like Lake at the Bottom of the World, the film I made about a group of scientists who find a lake hidden 3,600 feet under the ice sheet in Antarctica. It's on Amazon and iTunes, and it's all, you know, it's gone a lot. It's on YouTube, and I don't know, because one of the comments in there on the YouTube channel, it was like a bunch of people. I kind of left the climate change part till like middle of the film. It's 90 minutes, and I did that on purpose because the film has a lot of like big trucks, and I was trying to like, I don't know, I was trying to kind of reach a wide audience, you know, and like, I don't know, it's been seen a lot of times, but what are they feeling? And so YouTube lets you know exactly what some people are feeling. And and so, some of them, you know, were angry that there's a climate change message in there halfway through. Like, I liked it until the climate change message. And so then they give it like 1 star. And then somebody else wrote, Lake at the Bottom of the World, it should be Lake at the Perimeter of the World. And I thought, wow, a flat earther watched it. And I kind of felt proud.
Oh, no.
Yeah, no, I was like, wow, no, I got them. I got them to watch it. They may not have liked it.
They watched it, right.
And, you know, there's something about that. Like, I grew up kind of in Texas. I was born in England. My family's British, but we lived in Dallas, Texas. And I think about a lot about how do I reach those people in Texas. And Dallas isn't really Republican fully. It's got a mayor that's a Democrat. I mean, it's, you know, a wolf in sheep's clothing, something like that, I guess. Very cultural, multicultural. And but I still think a lot about how do I reach out to different people on the other side of the aisle, maybe. And like, I lived in Montana for 15 years. And And so I think that part's really important. How do you change people? And I'm really not answering your question whatsoever because I don't know. I don't know how
It's
to
a process.
find.
There's no right or wrong answer.
Well, that's
It's
true.
how we get there.
Because the progress part is, I think you only see it over time. And somebody else said something about how we're all just little pieces in a puzzle, that we put together. And I think the more climate change films, the better. The more films about progress and things that are changing things, the better, because we grow from that. The more things that teach people things, the better, because we create our own audience, and I think we've learned that through watching, the demise of Discovery Channel, for example. How could they have created the mermaid film? How did they do that? Because they created their own audience, and those people believe that mermaids exist now. Anyway.
At the periphery of the world, is that where they exist?
What's that?
At the periphery of the world?
Perimeter, yeah.
Perimeter.
Yeah, the perimeter. They're going to go off the edge, those mermaids.
We saw a lot of mermaids in the earlier Aquagrounds film. I just have to say that, though, and they were doing some darn good work. So they exist in my book. We're just about out of time here, but I wanted to we're going to end on kind of an interesting note because I think I want to honor this moment here that all of you are here. We vote with our feet. There's a lot of other things you could have been doing today, and being here to share in these stories and share in these perspectives, some of them new, some of them old, some of them very, very unique, but I think you're here, and that I appreciate that. We have just started, myself, a nonprofit called Land and Sea for All. And Land and Sea for All believes in the mission of telling better stories for people and planet. And that we think that change starts with a story, and we've got to tell better ones, because there are some failures in our present story, and I think we can continue to do better, and this democracy of storytelling hopefully gets us there. And so one of the things that we want to do with this group is to make sure that we find new ways to tell stories. And that means looking for that kind of diverse group of partners. And that includes individuals, that includes brands, that includes nonprofit, that includes foundations. And we set out to do this relatively recently, like 6 months ago. And we've now landed on our first project. And we're going to show you a teaser for that first project. The film is called Cultural Flow, and already in this project we have support from a New Earth project, we have support from Ducks Unlimited, a large nonprofit, we have support from Vitology, which is Pearl Jam's foundation. We're looking into support from brands like Yeti and Sitka to find different audiences, and they're already kind of excited about what we're trying to do, and we wanted to share that with you here. So this is a story about the Cumberland House Cree Nation, and that's in northern Saskatchewan. And it's a story about the health of an ecosystem, the health of biodiversity, and ultimately the health of a people. And we have just begun. We've shot maybe 6 days on this film, but we wanted to come up with a concept that could kind of share with you the kind of unique quality of the people in the place and the aesthetics of that place. And so I first want to, before we roll this, say a huge, huge thank you to a New Earth Project for putting this together, for Coast Film for hosting it, for Rivian for redoing this spectacular theater. And thank you, huge. And for all of you, again, that believe in the power of story. So with that, we're going to show you the little bit of Cultural Flow, and then afterwards we look forward to spending time more with all of you. Here we go. Thanks.
I speak for the muskrat, for the treaties broken, for the water stopped. For the people forgotten. For the wetlands drained. For the ducks and the geese. For the fish stranded. For the moose lost. For the braids of the river unwound. And for the future of my people. I speak for the muskrat.
Thank you, Coast Film Festival. Thank you all. Thanks to all of you as well. Thank you so much.